Hi, everyone. Welcome back to another episode of What They Don't Say. Today, I'm in Panama City, Florida. And on Saturday, Lori and I wrapped up an amazing fundraising event called Walk in My Shoes, which during the month of April, Lauren's Kids Foundation, not Lauren as in co-host, but Lauren Book. During the month of April, Lauren's Kids Foundation, thousands of people walk 1,500 miles across Florida. Now, this event is to raise awareness, educate communities, and empower survivors, specifically survivors of child sexual abuse. And today I'm here with Lori Allen, who is the executive director of the Gulf Coast Children's Advocacy Center. And we're here to continue this conversation. Hi, Lori. Thank you so much for letting me sit down with you today.
Absolutely. And you have to remember, we also have the Gulf Coast Sexual Assault Program, which is the Certified Rape Crisis Center. So I know that a lot of your podcast has highlighted a lot of adult sexual assault. And we've talked a little bit more about the child side of things and introducing Child Advocacy Center. But I think it's really important for me to say, especially for our staff and those that we serve, that I identify as serving both the Child Advocacy Center and our Certified Rape Crisis Center with my whole heart. They, both missions are so important.
Thank you for clarifying that. I was going to ask you to say all of your titles because you are a woman who does so much for this whole sexual abuse world. And I was like, I can't even put all of her titles into one sentence because you do so much. So thank you for clarifying that.
Of course.
So now to all the listeners, if this name of the organization sounds familiar at all to you, that's because we had Brent Patrick on, who is the COO of Gulf Coast, and that was episode 24. So if you guys want to go back and learn about some history and learn about, law enforcement and, sort of how advocacy and law enforcement are intertwined, I highly recommend you go back and check that episode out. But so Lori, your expertise, like you had said, you are an advocate for all survivors, no matter the age, but your expertise and your knowledge and the main core of your work is really in this child sexual abuse space. So that's what we're going to be focusing on today. We're going to dive right in. So to give our audience a little bit of history on you and sort of what you do, how did you end up in this space? What is a day in your life? Sort of speak to our audience about what you do.
So as the executive director of the Children's Advocacy Center, and we are a nationally accredited child advocacy center through the National Children's Alliance, I started here at the CAC as the executive director in 2012. But what got me to this place, which I feel like is my absolute purpose, is a lot of life experiences that I'll talk a little bit about after I do an introduction. But professionally, I grew up here in Panama City. My dad is career law enforcement. He just retired after 40 plus years of service.
Wow.
So I have been exposed to victim services work and just the importance of justice and safety for those in our community that are vulnerable. And I once graduated, went to school. I started off as pre-med. Okay. Got to organic chemistry and said pivot.
I think most people feel that way too. I've heard OChem is like the killer.
Yeah, for sure. And I ended up getting my bachelor's degree in mathematics and a master's degree in public health with a specialty in biostatistics and epidemiology from The Ohio State University. So, still a fun degree to me, but certainly others were like, no.
Thank you.
So after I finished, moved to Dallas for a few years, did the stay-at-home mom thing, and moved back to Panama City in 2006. And it was my dad that was really encouraging and said, I think you'd be a really good child protective investigator with the Florida Department of Children and Families. You have a heart for this. It really had not a whole lot to do with what I had just got my master's degree in. And I think the starting pay was like $24,000. And if I had stayed in my degree field, I was looking at 6+ figures. But I think that is important for your audience, especially those that are trying to decide what to do with their life. I can imagine no more fulfilling career. I've been doing this for 20 years now, almost 20 years, doing what I'm doing. I think when we're young, it's always like, what do you want to do? I want to do something where I make lots of money and I can be famous, and I can be successful. Do something that you love, number one. And then number two, find something that helps others and, shares some part of good in the world. And you can do that in any capacity, really. It's all about perspective. So that was just my little 2 cents to say I'm no regrets of going into that career field. So I started and I worked for 6 years with child safety. And in addition to doing child protective investigations, I became the training specialist for a large part of Northwest Florida. And then it was from that role that I transitioned here to the Children's Advocacy Center. So you're absolutely right. A lot of focus on child safety, child welfare, but there was often an intersectionality between children who had experienced a maltreatment and their parents who had also experienced a maltreatment. So a lot of intergenerational abuse or neglect that include domestic violence and sexual violence. And so I became very familiar with all types of victimization, even working in that role. And it was in 2015 that there was a gap in services for adult survivors of sexual assault in our community. And to give you some perspective too, so I don't know if you'll ever remember this, you were probably small, but when Panama City was known for spring break, like that was the college destination for
like Florida in general, especially. It's just the beaches and all that.
But it was different in Panama City. There was some shows that were highlighting girls being sexually exploited that were nationally known. There were just massive partying, a lot of vulnerability. And so there was not a fantastic response here locally, and not a lot of discussion around that. And I can vividly remember, I was young in my career, when the sheriff at the time, his name is Frank McKeithen. He's a dear friend of my family, and I love him so. He's retired now. And we have a wonderful sheriff. You met him on Saturday, yes. Tommy Ford. He's fantastic
so
too.
Lovely.
But a girl was gang raped, and it was videoed behind one of the super clubs here on the beach. And that was it for our community. We were like, no more spring break. We're done. The community has really instilled itself to, one, create a culture that does not have any sort of facilitation of these heinous crimes. And number two, really wanted to make it a destination that is safe and family friendly and inviting for its beautiful beaches. And so it was all around that time that there was really no rape crisis center. And we were asked to take it on. So what we would have done, I would imagine this massive response during the spring break should that environment had continued. And I'm so grateful that we had that change within our community. So our response has largely been now serving adults that live within our community rather than a lot of college age visitors that would have been our primary, I think, audience or client base if we had started any earlier than that, which it's really sad to think that all that time, there was such a need and it didn't happen. So that was the impetus behind us doing the adult side on the Rape Crisis Center and how I got involved in that. And it has been a phenomenally fulfilling role to take on that responsibility and help so many in need. And it was only until I started working in this field at the CAC that I learned a number of my family members were impacted by incest and sexual violence, which explained a lot of the unfortunate outcomes in their lives that ended in untimely deaths, addictions, incarcerations, things of that nature. So I have multiple motivations for what led me to the field.
Let's kind of rewind a little bit. When your dad said, I think you should go into this space, at such a young age, you were able to have that maturity to look at changing people's lives versus monetary motivations. Like what was your first thought when your dad said that to you? Was it clear or was it just like, Dad, come on, like I'll try it. I'll give it a shot.
Yeah, I was excited, honestly, because there's not a lot of careers where you're handed an individual or a family and it's like they need you, right? Like how often where you're not responding in a hospital setting. Like right. I knew I would not do EMS. I would not be an ER doctor. Like it worked out, right? Mm-hmm. I have so much respect for individuals that can respond to both emotional and physical trauma. For me, it was looking at very complex traumatic experiences and a lot of challenges that families just didn't have the resources to help overcome, and that I was the one that was called in along with the team that we had within our system of care to help alleviate so much of that stress and try to stabilize families and partner with them. And that was exciting and I really evolved over time in my career. I think that I was young and saw things from a, little bit different perspective when I started. I think I was in my mid-20s versus today. I just can see things a lot clearer and not so incident focused like I did back then, but really looking back at the why and tracing it back even to generations. And someone told me a long time ago that often with these types of cases, especially when there's a failure to support a survivor, it's not the absence of love. It's the absence of the ability of having empathy in that moment when you're hurting also. And it's really created a different perspective for me when helping families.
I really love that, especially because there's so many aspects of the healing journey where you need support and help. And Lauren Book was talking about this before we started the walk. She was saying that you have the law enforcement aspect, you have the advocacy aspect, you have the community aspect. And if all three of those things aren't working together, then most likely the survivor's healing journey is either going to take a lot longer, or they won't get justice, or both, or they'll end up with a very intense form of PTSD and everything along those lines. Sort of switching gears a little bit, what is something within the space of child sexual abuse that you think people aren't talking about enough?
I think still nationally, we're not recognizing the number of children that are impacted by childhood sexual abuse. And we're still not comfortable with the language that's needed for children to safely talk about it when it does happen. So we have to get away from this secrecy/shame around body parts. Just body parts.
Oh my gosh.
Like an eyeball is an eyeball, a finger is a finger, a vagina is a vagina. I just don't understand why we still have such an uncomfort with teaching our children the anatomically correct body parts. Because when we do that, we're saying that's not okay to talk about.
Right.
And, it has to be okay to talk about. There are things that can physically go wrong, and I shouldn't be afraid to ask my mom when my vagina hurts,
right,
or, when my penis hurts. Like, that should be a normal conversation that I should not be ashamed to have. Those are not bad words. And
they're a part of your body.
They are a part of your body. And those that exploit children use just that alone to their benefit because it's a secret. And it's a secret that then they're going to provide some education about because, they're special. The child is special to them, and, they're special to the child. And, mommy wouldn't want to know because this is not something we talk about, remember?
Right. Oh, which just is a whole other aspect to why a child can be manipulated and everything like that.
The psychological manipulation is so significant. And it's different from a lot of adult sexual assaults because it tends to be acute in nature, where childhood sexual abuse is complex and it's a process. I don't like the word grooming as much. That's what, has been used historically. But to me, it's more of the psychological preparation for what the perpetrator is trying to achieve with the victimization. And so it's gaining that trust, it's building that relationship, it's teaching them what they want them to know about a subject that their parents are not willing to talk about.
And a lot of times young kids, whether they realize it or not, and I don't know if it changes at a certain age, but it's kind of that desire to be older. I have someone in my family who's 7 years old, and she always talks about how she wants to be older. That way she can have a cell phone, and that way she can drive a car and call her friends. And like, that's all you think about is the being older when you're younger. And you don't really understand what being older really means.
Agreed.
But if an adult can give you, that sort of quote unquote treat of being older or an aspect of aging that is appealing to them, then they're going to have such a stronger hold over them.
Absolutely. And think about it. I mean, when we're little, we always want to sit at the adult table at Thanksgiving.
Oh, yeah.
We just always, you think about all the things you want to be grown whenever you're little. And yes, perpetrators use that to their advantage. And they also use conflicting natural biological responses to their advantage.
Could you explain that?
Sure. So especially it's very complicated for male survivors, when this happens. So if they have a biological response, if they get an erection when they're being abused, then they feel like they deserved it or they liked it.
Or they're like confused sexually all of a sudden. And
Yes. And so perpetrators also, if you don't provide education to your kids about the natural biological responses to their body parts, then that is an opportunity for a perpetrator to then use that information to their advantage as well. So the education component is something that I feel like in our country we have to do a better job at. We have to be shining a light on this, because in darkness is where this thrives. And now you're seeing it taking place on online exploitation. And I think the latest statistic is first onset age of exposure to pornography is now 9 years old in our country. And so for those families that are like, I'm just not comfortable with this. I want my child to be innocent. I want them to not know. Unfortunately, a lot of that's taken out of our hands. I get that as a parent, and we just have to come to terms with what is reality and what our children are exposed to, and prepare them with the best armed information.
One of the programs here at Gulf Coast is you guys educate parents on how to teach their kids about consent and their body parts and all of that. So if there was a parent listening to this episode, what sort of tools would you tell them or would you give them to be able to teach their kids about this? Because when I try my best to think back to that age, I think when someone said butt and I'd giggle.
Yeah.
And so how does a parent teach a kid about consent and their body parts and make it an approachable conversation so that it's safer ultimately?
Yes. So early and often is what I would suggest. And, if you start off very early at bath time, let's scrub your head, let's grab our arm, let's grab our vagina, and it just becomes the norm, in your naming and your learning. And then there's not then you won't,
right.
Because there's no shame or silliness to it. It's just normal. So that's one thing. Two, there is a lot of really wonderful guidance out there to help parents with this. And it's important for parents, your children, your family. There is not a single answer I'm going to tell you that's going to be a fit-all, but there is information to help you arm yourself as to what's going to be the best way to have these conversations with your children. And so I have 2 children, and I've had to have those conversations differently with each one of those children. I had one child that was very sensitive, and so it had to be taken a little bit differently than another child that's a force of nature, and there was nothing that's going to bother her. And so it was very blunt, and it was very early, and she had questions, and thankfully she was comfortable enough to ask them. So, I think that the Lawrence Kids Foundation does a fantastic job. They have the curriculum, Safer, Smarter Kids. It is available on their website, so lawrencekids.org.
We'll put all of that in the bio of this episode as well.
Yes, and that is a wonderful way to learn how to best have these conversations with your kids, is utilize those evidence-based resources that are present. And I am proud of the fact that the state of Florida has mandated this curriculum to be taught. So in some form, it's not necessarily Safer, Smarter Kids, but it is a form of curriculum to address this, unfortunately, epidemic that has plagued our world. I remember speaking at a chamber event years ago, and I said, for all of us that were raised in the 80s, do you remember getting the fire education, stop, drop, and roll?
Oh.
And everybody's shaking their head, yes. So if you were to encounter a fire and you were, something, your clothing or you knew how to respond. Said, how many in this room, if you would mind identifying, has ever had to utilize the stop, drop, and roll? And I think one person in a crowd of several hundred raised their hand. I said, here's the statistic just on childhood sexual abuse. 1 in 3 girls, 1 in 5 boys before the age of 18. So 1/3 of this room, or 1/4 of this room, if we combine the sexes, raise your hand. That's how many would benefit from this education today. And it was just an eye opener.
Right.
And that's just what we know.
And
how many do we not know? Mm-hmm. Because we know that this has thrived under the shroud of secrecy and shame.
Mm. Yeah, I love that you said that statistic. I was talking to you about this the other day, that Jess Michaels, she was saying that a kid is 117 times more likely to be assaulted than to catch on fire. Yet we're so focused on the catching on fire and the calling 911, which is also important.
It is very important.
However, this should just be a part of that conversation. It shouldn't be separated. We don't need to make it weird or anything like that. It should just be a part of what we're teaching our kids.
Yes.
What are the long-term and short-term impacts of a child being abused at a young age? What does that look like for them? And this generational cycle of abuse that can happen, but psychologically and socially and emotionally, what happens to kids when they're sexually abused at a young age?
So there are factors that vary the response to trauma. And I am not a psychiatrist or a psychologist or even a licensed mental health counselor by trade, but I do read a lot about this sort of work. And I have had the experience of working with trauma survivors for nearly 20 years. And so I think some good resources to lean on this. You and I talked about this before. Dr. Bruce Perry has done phenomenal work around the trauma response and abilities to heal. And other books that we've leaned on heavily here is The Body Knows the Score.
Love that one.
Yes, The Trauma Stewardship. There's so much out there that's reputable, credible, where you can learn how to help navigate individuals. So for kids, we often tell parents to look for changes. You know, if you have a child who was very young and was sleeping through the night and didn't seem to have what we call night terrors, was, potty trained, ate well, seemed to be happy, engaged, thriving, and then all of a sudden started wetting the bed again and was very attached to a single caregiver in the home, started baby talking again where they were not, started having night terrors. If you see these drastic change in multiple areas of a child's life, that could be an indicator that something in their environment has changed. It's no different from when we're talking to law enforcement about habitual runaways. Kids are not inherently good or bad. I can remember my grandmother, whenever my oldest was born, and she was comfortable, and she said, "Oh, you have a good baby." I said, "Well, I think that's a misconception. Babies are not good nor bad.
Right.
Babies are comfortable or uncomfortable. And it's the same thing with any human being. We're either at peace and content, or we have unmet needs and we're disrupted or dysregulated. One of our trauma therapists likened it. They said, humans are just complicated house plants. We need water and sunshine, and we need some interaction. But for the most part, if we can just have our basic needs met, then we're going to be okay.
We're good.
And when we start wilting or start dying or start shedding, then something's not right. There's something out of balance. And that's the first indicator. However, there are some kids who have experienced terrible maltreatment, and because of their own personal resiliency, spiritual relationships, familial supports, or the fact that when it happened, they had the education, they knew, they immediately told, it ended up being acute in nature, then they really didn't need any formal trauma therapy, and they didn't have necessarily a trauma response.
Okay.
I'm saying all that to say every individual is different in their response. Those are some indicators that something could be wrong, or that there is a dysregulated response to an event that has happened. And it is okay, too, to understand that some people respond to trauma differently. And if you don't notice a change, that doesn't mean something bad didn't happen.
Right.
They're just responding it differently than what's expected.
So it's different for every case.
It really is.
And let's say you're a parent, your kid comes to you and says, "Mom, like this man touched me," or "Dad, something happened," or something along those lines. They're basically trying to communicate that someone violated them. What are the next steps for the parent? I know it's different varying by state, but like, what is the first thing a parent should do in that moment?
Number one, do not freak out. Do not yell.
That's
as much as
hard.
you can.
Yeah.
And that's the thing. Like, you need to prepare for when that happens. It's just like our preparation for active shooter when we do training here at the CAC. Like, biologically, you're going to have a freeze, flight, or fight response. The more you think about what your plan is going to be, the better equipped you're going to be at enacting that plan. And so you as a parent, something traumatic has happened to your child. How am I going to respond? If you freak out, then they're going to freak out, and then they may minimize what actually happened or even recant.
And they might start focusing on trying to fix the parent and make sure the parent's okay.
100%, because then the focus is now on me freaking out and not them, who has bravely come forward to disclose this horrible thing that has happened, often by someone who both of them know, love, and trust.
Right.
So that's the first thing. Don't freak out. Think about how you're going to respond. Number two, thank them for telling you. It took courage. Thank you for telling me. I believe you. I believe you. Like, start by believing.
Always.
Always.
Because it doesn't make a difference in the end, no matter what happens.
No. Start by believing, because you can't undo when you start by disbelieving, right? I mean, you can't undo that. And oh gosh, can you imagine like being a child and going to someone that you love, like a parent, and saying something happened to you, and the response is 1, freak out, 2, I don't believe you.
Horrible.
Like
what a unsafe space your parent becomes.
And for so many kids, that is a harder thing to overcome in therapy than the actual abuse itself. Man, that for me elicits more like tears in my eyes thinking about what these kids have to overcome, right? And so, start by believing, thank them for telling you, thank them for having the courage to tell, and then respond to the authorities for help. Then report it to law enforcement, then report it to Child Protective Services. Don't ask the questions. Don't do the investigation. It's not your job to investigate. It's not your job to prove it. It's not your job to confront the perpetrator.
Right.
That is what law enforcement and Child Protective Services are there for. And so your job is to believe and support.
Period.
That's it.
Yep.
So start there, and the system will navigate itself from there. And then places like child advocacy centers, there's nearly 1,000 across the country. Find one, and they'll have resources to help you.
Yeah. And that's something that I didn't even really realize existed before, is that like there are centers just like where we are now, that are there to advocate for your children and to help you navigate this process as well. And that you don't have to go through this process alone. And as a parent, like I'm sure your first reaction is like anger or fear or like I'm gonna go
shock,
like
disbelief,
all of that. And I can imagine that for a parent, it's hard to be the rock for your kids constantly. But in that time, that's like a keep being the rock. Keep just, I believe you, I love you, thank you.
And then when you get to a child advocacy center, there will be a space for the child to get support and then for you to get support away from each other. So then you can take that breath and be like, I just can't believe this happened.
Right.
But don't say that in front of your child, right? Like let the advocates here help walk you through your disbelief, your shock, your anger, all the things that are going through your mind. If you can just think about, pre-plan how I'm going to respond, and this is what I'm going to do.
That's such a good point, that you have to find a way to empty your cup that's not onto your child.
Yes.
Oh my gosh, I love that. Also, as a side note, anybody who's watching this right now, we are in the coolest room, I would say. We didn't talk about it at all, but it's a kid's court space.
It is.
And they're, like, once again, if you're not watching, there are chairs with stuffed animals, and there's a Minnie Mouse as the judge, and there's a gavel, and it's a fairly large space that we're in. And so I'm assuming you take kids in here to show them what court is like.
It is, exactly.
Okay.
I mean, because it can be so scary.
Yeah.
Court for adults is
so scary.
And so, kids innocently would be like, what is the black robe for? Or what is the hammer on the table? Like, they are so innocently wondering, like, what's going on here? And so we try to be as system sensitive and trauma sensitive as we can for victims of sexual abuse and physical abuse or whatever the maltreatment is, neglect for children, and they have a space that they can come and learn, so it's not this scary unknown thing whenever they do have to encounter the court system.
That's incredible. And like, I've heard a story a long time ago that there was a kid who was going to get an MRI done, I think it was, and the kid was screaming and crying and like couldn't go in the MRI. And so ultimately, like, this doctor's office adapted turning the MRI machine into what looked like a spaceship. And then all of a sudden kids weren't scared anymore.
Yeah.
And it became a more approachable thing. Still a scary thing, but it's speaking their language, because you do have to treat them differently. Their brain is at a very different part of development than our brain is. And so I love this space, and, being able to teach them about what a gavel is before they see it. And then in court, they can just say, oh, I know what that is, instead of just one other scary thing that's making sound.
Yes.
Additionally, the lobby here it's painted beautifully. It's like a sea scene. Oh my gosh, it's so almost warm and inviting. And some people might be thinking, well, this isn't a warm and inviting topic. Like, you should just have it as a standard lobby waiting area. But no, like, it should be an inviting space. This child has just gone through something horrible and traumatic and is trying to figure out what's next for them. And so I just wanted to commend you. And I don't know if other advocacy centers out there do this, but this just feels like such a safe space for kids.
So, and that's the intent, is that it's a child-friendly setting where kids know this is a place for them, and it does feel like a safe space, because it is a safe space. It's not a sterile environment. It's not, you talked about the unknown. Well, there's fear in the unknown. So if we have a space that looks familiar to them because it's their child, then, there's less to be scared about. They know that the people here are going to greet them with smiles. They're going to greet them with joy. And yes, it's a terribly sad, confusing, and horrible topic. But in spite of that, there's still joy and hope.
So you are a woman of many talents. You do so much for this sexual assault world. And I never know really what to call it. I just call it kind of like the sexual assault space. Last time we spoke, and as well as this morning. So last time we spoke, you had gotten back from DC. This morning, you were creating a video for something going on in DC. Overall, you do a lot in like the policy world within sexual assault, right? Am I saying that correctly?
I do. I am very much engaged in, especially the civic side of things in the state of Florida, but nationally as well. Because it is important that our legislative bodies understand the work that's done by victim services centers, rape crisis centers, domestic violence shelters, child advocacy centers, is transformational for our communities. And the science is there. It was in 1998, so we're talking almost 30 years ago, where Kaiser Permanente released the ACE study, the Adverse Childhood Experience Study. And it has since been more studies done to confirm those findings, to say the root cause of a lot of things in society that are disruptive is childhood trauma. And let's do something to work on that, right?
Right. Yeah, absolutely.
So I feel like it's my life's mission to make sure that, yes, we need to study lots of things that are important in our world and our environment, and we need to prioritize a lot of topics, but this one should be in the top 3.
Absolutely.
I mean, it really needs to be. Mm-hmm. And we are not there yet. We have to fight for funding from a victim services arena yearly. Yearly. I want you to think about that. Like, it is mind-boggling to me that we have to fight for funding to be able to provide a forensic interview of a child that has been raped, and a medical exam for a child that's been raped, and provide therapy for a child that's been raped, and a victim advocate to help them through court. We have to fight for that. We have to do better as a country. Yeah. We have to do better as a country. And the sad part is, it's such an underfunded mandate. You look at major metropolitan areas, they are running on skeleton crews. So that means that, some kids get in for services and some do not. And that's not okay either. At some point, you and I talked about this Saturday, there has to be a champion. Right. Multiple champions. There needs to be a champion in the state of Florida. And thankfully, we have some here. And you met Senator Book and Senator Trumbull on Saturday. Those are 2 fantastic champions, and they make a difference. There has to be champions in every state, and there has to be a champion federally that's going to step up to say, this is our issue. We are going to fix this so that these victim services centers never have to fight for their funding to survive. The content is hard enough. I mean, really. And experience matters. Do you want a brain surgeon who's done 3 surgeries, or do you want a brain surgeon that's done 3,000 surgeries?
Yeah, easy, 3,000. Yeah.
You know what I mean? Like, same deal. We know that the trauma, the vicarious trauma that victim services staff carry gives their work lifespan somewhere between 3 and 5 years. So if we can do everything we can to support them, to give them longevity in this space, then let's do that. And let's not have to add to their stress by them worrying whether or not they have job stability.
Right.
I mean, come on.
It's ridiculous.
It's a no-brainer.
Yeah. And also, not to mention that like sexual assault is not or child abuse, let's even start there, is not a controversial topic. Like there's no division on whether like one side says we should have that and one side says we shouldn't have that. Like both can agree that it's horrible. Yes. And as a society, we've really matured and learned that your childhood has a huge impact with what sort of adult you become and how you treat others and how you walk through life and your emotional intelligence. And so like, it's not an excuse anymore to just say like, oh, well, we didn't know that this impacts the future.
Yeah.
Like we know, people just have to be willing to make that their champion issue.
Yes.
And it's not just for a better mental space for one person. It's for a future with less violence, with people who are more emotionally intelligent,
Yes.
with people that treat their kids better, and that this, cycle of abuse does not continue over time.
And access to education.
Right.
Look at most kids who do not have access to education. Look at their history. Look at their environment. And then what does that predict? If they don't have great educational outcomes, then it's a high predictor of, an interaction with our criminal justice system, not in a good way,
right.
or unemployment, or early fatality, or adverse medical conditions. Things that, this sounds so callous, but honestly, when you're talking to policymakers, they want to know the dollar impact. That's way more expensive than funding these programs. But at the end of the day, let's just get to the humanity of it. Those are people, right? Those are people, and every single person deserves better than what they currently are getting. And so I think if we invest in this, I know if we invest in this, then we will see transformational change all the way across, better educational outcomes, fewer people going to prison and incarceration,
right.
less unemployed, and it starts way earlier than we think.
Right.
Whenever I was in New Orleans last summer for a Parents as Teachers conference, I was able to listen to a presenter who spoke about the basics.org. And he is a trained economist, Dr. Brilliant. I think he went to MIT, studied economics. And he said as a young child, he saw the disparities within his communities in Cleveland and asked his dad, why do they not have food and we have food? And he said that became his mission. He was like 8 or 9 years old. And he said, I want to find the answer to that question. Wow. So decided talk about determination, right? Yeah. Like he had it figured out. So he went to school and he's been trying to answer that question. He's now, later in his career, and he says, my research has led to the first 3 months of life. Educational gaps and disparities go all the way back to the first 3 months of life. So what makes a parent more engaged? One who doesn't have a trauma history that they're trying to recover from, right? One who understands what healthy parenting and support and attachment looks like. One who has the ability to meet they and their baby's basic needs.
Right.
Then we don't have to worry about neglect or emotional duress or all of these other traumatic events that a toxic environment can give to a 0 to 3 month old to have to recover from the rest of their life. Right. Like we can do this.
Yes, it's possible.
We can do this,
yeah.
Right? It just takes champions who understand the importance of this work.
Yeah. And aren't those champions and policymakers supposed to be focusing on the people anyways? Aren't they here for the people, right?
Absolutely. I think a lot of it is not caring. A lot of it is not knowing. And so we have a knowing representative body here in our community. They know me. I know them. They know the work we do. They advocate for us at larger levels.
It's intertwined. It's not
It
just
needs to be, yes.
Yeah.
So like you and I talked about it. Take this information, take it back to Denver, plant seeds. Like if all of us do our part across this country, then collectively we can make a significant impact. And then we won't have to have this conversation. We will say,
right.
How amazing is it
that we're unemployed?
Yes, that we're all thriving,
Yeah.
that we're all thriving.
Absolutely. And for people out there who aren't necessarily like in the political space or anything like that, you might be thinking, oh, that doesn't apply to me. But having just conversations in your group of friends and teaching your friends, because maybe they, hopefully they haven't experienced any form of sexual abuse in any way, but maybe when they have a kid one day, they'll remember that conversation that you had with them where you explained, what those impacts are and everything within that realm. And that can be a change maker just by having those conversations with the people within your community.
Never underestimate the impact that you alone can have. I mean, even your sphere of influence can grow to bigger and bigger and bigger and bigger. And I think for so many people, they're so disengaged because of the divisiveness of politics, or they're so overwhelmed with the stress of the economics and just trying to raise a family today. I mean, there's so many things that are distracting. But if we can all come together on a few core common issues, then, man, wouldn't that be awesome?
A better world, a brighter future.
Absolutely.
Can you talk about the areas of your work that give you hope for a brighter future?
That is a really great question following Saturday. So I, for the first time in my career, got to witness multi-generational healing at the walk on this weekend. So whenever I see something like that, I'm at the point in my career where I see a child that came to the center who was under 10, and then I see them now as an adult with their own children, and they're thriving and they're happy. Man, that's where the hope lives. That is like, it is a testament to everything that we know and believe to be lived out in the flesh. And they are still walking with us and advocating for other people. And they themselves have changed the course of their family. And, you know, we don't have to talk about the cycle being broken. It was broken.
Amazing.
Yeah.
And you're able to see that because they came and got it. They had the resources that they needed at the time that they needed it.
That's it.
Thank you so much, Lori. I know Lori has to run to her next thing. Like I said, everyone, this woman is so busy and doing so much, but thank you so much for having me. You're just incredible. And I just can't say thank you enough.
Well, I am so excited for you and Lauren. You took a horrible experience and you found a way to raise your voice and to lift others. And that takes a lot of strength. I'm proud of you both. It's awesome.
Thank you.
Yeah.
Thank you so much to everyone who tuned into today's episode. It was such a special episode, and it was incredible to be able to be with Lori in person in Florida. And none of that would have been possible without all of you. So thank you so much for listening, for supporting us. I love you guys. You're amazing. Now, with that being said, if you have any questions, comments, want to share your story, have an episode idea, go ahead and send us an email at whattheydon'tsaythepodcast@gmail.com. Or you can DM us on Instagram or TikTok. Those are both What They Don't Say official. Those will all be linked in the bio of this episode. Being in Florida and being able to tour the Advocacy Center, as well as, meet politicians who have made this a champion issue for them, and just talk to people who are really in this child sexual abuse space, gave me a whole lot more knowledge and a new perspective on the space as a whole. So I want to be able to share all of that knowledge with all of you guys, but it's a little bit too long to fit into this episode. So stay tuned for a future episode where I sit down with Lauren and talk about all of those things and give a more in-depth view of my time in Florida as a whole. I wanted to give one more shout out to Lori Allen, as well as the Gulf Coast Children's Advocacy Center, for taking me out there and getting me out to Florida and, showing me around and introducing me to so many wonderful people. Thank you, thank you, thank you. I know I might sound like a broken record, but truly it was such an incredible experience that I never thought I would have, and you guys gave that to me. And so just thank you. The work you are doing is incredible. It's changing lives on a scale that is really giving me hope for a brighter future for our children. You guys are amazing. I love you so much. I hope you have a great rest of your week, and I'll catch you on the flip side. Cheers.